welcome. I'm Suma Katauka and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines of this hour. US President Donald Trump signals restraint on Iran, saying he hopefully won't need military action and plans direct talks, while Pentagon officials affirm readiness in Europe. The EU brands Iran's Revolutionary Guards as a terrorist group, sparking protests in Brussels and warnings from EU leaders that the region cannot afford another war. EU President has declared a national emergency and warned if tariffs on nations like Mexico that provide oil to Cuba, escalating trade tensions. Thailand's reformist politician Nathapong emerges as frontrunner in polls ahead of the February vote, signaling potential shifts in the country's political landscape. Following US pressure, the ruling aims to shift control over the strategic waterway, marking a significant geopolitical development. China wants to take appropriate measures. US financial markets see extreme volatility as sharp swings in gold and silver equities lead to $9 trillion movement in capitalization. Trump continues trade war with Canada with renewed threats of decertifying Canadian-made aircraft and charge a 50% tariff on those planes. Towns in Australia's southeast swelter in temperatures close to 50 degrees Celsius as wildfires rage through parts of rural Victoria. According to a government statement, Burkina Faso's military government has dissolved all political parties, phasing out more than 100 groups. Authorities said party assets will be transferred to the state and a draft law sent to the transitional legislature, framing the move as necessary for national unity. Now we start with Middle East. Turkey is pushing for renewed nuclear diplomacy between Iran and the United States. Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan says restarting talks would bring major gains for all sides and could open the door to lifting sanctions on Iran. Speaking alongside his Iranian counterpart in Istanbul, Fidan also urged Washington to resist Israeli pressure for military action, warning a strike on Iran would seriously destabilize the region. Let's listen into what the Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan has shared.
İsrail'in ABD'yi İran askeri saldırı yapmaya ikna etmeye çalıştığını da görmekteyiz. İsrail'in bu çabaları bölgemizin kırılgan durumdaki istikrarına büyük zarar verme potansiyeli taşımaktadır. ABD yönetiminin sağduyuyla hareket ederek buna fırsat vermeyeceğini ümit ediyoruz. İsrail bölgedeki istikrarsızlaştırma politikalarına son.
Now for this discussion, we welcome Professor Andrew Latham. He's an international affairs expert, joins us live from Minneapolis. Thank you very much, Mr. Latham, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now, looking at this, Turkish foreign minister has called for US-Iran to talk and open talks, especially on nuclear program, to ease the regional tensions. So, what's the possibility of that, and how would that look like right now?
Well, first of all, it's quite clear that Turkey has at least two motives. It really has no interest in chaos in the region and the way that might spill over into Turkey proper. And also Turkey wants to play a role as a kind of regional great power, a natural interlocutor, bringing conflicting and competing sides together to hash out some kind of an agreement. How likely is that to be the case? Well, pressure is building. The Israelis are getting a little bit impatient. The United States, I think, has an interest in a negotiated settlement, certainly not JCPOA 2.0, something a little more comprehensive, dealing with missiles and nuclear capabilities, and also Iran's regional support for proxies like Hezbollah and Hamas. Whether the two or three or four sides, depending on how this is configured ultimately, what the common ground is, what they can all agree on, is really what's undecided at the moment. It's quite clear that there might be a deal on nuclear weapons, maybe even on Iran's proxies and regional geopolitics, but I don't think there's going to be an agreement on Iran's defenses, because Iran sees its missile capability as absolutely essential, and the United States and Israel see those weapons as incompatible with regional peace and security. So that's likely to be the big sticking point here. Whether they can resolve it, I'm actually quite skeptical.
Right, and if they cannot resolve it, then what now?
Well, I can see at least two scenarios, one of which would be an Israeli-initiated military action. They are obviously a little more invested being in the region themselves and a little more concerned about Iran's missile and nuclear capabilities, but also its support for proxies like Hamas and Hezbollah. And the United States then would either join in that strike or a parallel set of strikes. Think back to the 12-day war last year, that sort of operation. What would the targets be? I don't think it would be targeted to facilitate regime change. I think it would be targeted specifically on nuclear power, on the IRGC, Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps headquarters and command and control infrastructure, things like that, that actually address the issues that Israel and the US have with Iran, and not to bring about a change of regime.
Right, and the dismantle of nuclear program of Iran, which US and many countries are calling for, it seems unlikely from Iranian side. It seems unrealistic also from Iranian side. So what other channels can they use, all the countries who have problem with this Iran's nuclear program use to de-escalate the situation?
Well, I think at this point it would require a fairly comprehensive deal. For whatever reason, pardon me, justified or not, Iran feels insecure. And how do states deal with insecurity? They arm themselves, in this case with nuclear weapons, but also with allies and proxies, again, Hezbollah, Hamas, etc. But Hezbollah and Hamas have been taken away. And Iran, I think right now, given internal developments, but also external developments, is feeling quite insecure. And in that situation, it's not likely to give up. It doesn't have nuclear weapons at the moment, but it has a very short breakout time, in which it could field nuclear weapons in months, not years, if it decided to do so.
Right.
I can't see it giving that up readily. There would have to be a big deal, which would be reassuring to the Iranians that they're not going to be subject to continuing sanctions and support for dissident movements within the country. And then if that regime felt secure, they might be willing to negotiate away this nuclear capability in development. And that would have to be verifiable from an American and Israeli perspective. The International Atomic Energy would have to have inspectors on the ground, etc. It would have to be a comprehensive deal that really addressed the core insecurities of Iran and the core insecurities of Israel and the United States. And that's a heavy lift. I don't think that's easily arrived at. The JCPOA during the Obama administration wasn't that. It dealt with some of the issues, nuclear, but it didn't deal with a lot of the other issues. So it would have to be more than JCPOA, and I'm not sure that that's in the cards at the moment.
And last but not least, since UAE and Saudi Arabia, also Turkey, have said that their airspace won't be allowed to use by US in terms of attacks towards Iran. So where will US use if it were to use this?
Well, it would have to use carrier-launched aircraft and sea-based assets in the Mediterranean. That's the only way that they would be able to strike. If they're not able to use Turkish airspace or Saudi airspace, Diego Garcia wouldn't be in play. So it does limit the United States' options. And the reason for that is none of those countries, they're all hostile towards Iran, but there's been a kind of détente in the region in the last year or two. And nobody in the region has an interest in a war which could escalate chaos, would affect the price of oil, sometimes maybe in a positive way, but it might pinch off the Straits of Hormuz and the Bab el-Mandeb, the Gate of Tears at the bottom of the Red Sea. And that would affect all of the economies in the region. They have no interest in a full-blown war in the region, and therefore are signaling very clearly to Israel and the United States that that's the case, that they're not interested in war, and the signal that they're sending is, you can't use our airspace.
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much, Mr. Latham, for sharing that insight. Please stay with us as we come back to you for a later discussion. discussion. Now, Turkey is calling for renewed nuclear talks between Iran and the United States. Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan says restarting negotiations would bring significant gains for all sides and could pave the way for lifting sanctions on Iran. He has made the remarks at a joint press conference in Istanbul with Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi. Let's listen into what the Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan has shared.
Müzakereler aynı zamanda İran'a yönelik yaptırımların kaldırılmasının ve İran'ın uluslararası ekonomik sistemle bütünleşmesinin yolunu açacaktır. Bu adımlar tüm taraflara önemli kazanımlar sağlayacaktır.
Meanwhile, Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi has struck a firm tone. He has said Iran's missile and defense capabilities are not negotiable. Araghchi has added that Tehran is open to nuclear talks, but only if they are fair and conducted on equal footing. He has also said no meeting with U.S. officials is planned yet, stressing that preparations must come first. Now we move on to U.S. Student organizers have called for walkouts and protests across the United States on Friday to demand that federal immigration agents withdraw from Minnesota. After 2 fatal shootings of U.S. citizens generated public outrage, the call for a general strike follows last week's protests when thousands marched through Minneapolis in the bitter cold, urging an end to President Donald Trump's immigration crackdown in their city. Meanwhile, a candlelight vigil was held outside a Veteran Affairs hospital in New York City for Alex Pretty, an intensive care nurse at a hospital for military veterans who was shot and killed by immigration officers. Some vigil attendees have responded. Let's listen into what they have shared.
It's very important to a lot of people, and sometimes you don't know what to do. You try to do as much as you can, but sometimes the best thing you can do is just to show up at a vigil. But that's what we try to do, because we're in solidarity and we care.
We're in this fight with you. We believe in everything that you've been in the streets for, and we're going to do everything that we can from where we are to support you and to demand the same thing that you're demanding, which is to abolish ICE, to get ICE out of our cities, out of our communities, out of our workplaces.
Now we welcome back Mr. Andrew Latham. He's joining us from Minneapolis. So now that we have heard, supports from New York City's vigil that was held, how do you feel as a local of Minneapolis?
Well, it's a big deal here, despite the fact that there are signals now that ICE might be dialing down its enforcement efforts here. The 2 tragic deaths have left a mark. The fear amongst in my case, international students and faculty who are here on work visas and whatnot is palpable. People are very concerned, but it's not just a local issue, of course. It resonates across the country, especially in cities where enforcement efforts have been ramped up and where there's large migrant communities. The mood in the country uniformly, I think, but especially in places like the Twin Cities, which have been subject to these enforcement efforts, is really tense, fearful, and there's a lot of anger as well. So that's a toxic brew of emotions that are now beginning to have real political expression.
And our situation de-escalating?
Well, there's hope there that Kristi Noem, who was the architect and leader of the sort of sweep approach to immigration enforcement, just indiscriminate and broad-based, and let's pick up everybody everywhere. She's been sidelined in this now, and Tom Homan, who's the border czar, who has a much more targeted and low-profile and arguably more humane approach to immigration law enforcement, is now running the show. So will the enforcement efforts stop or fade away altogether? No. But will they look different? That's the hope, that they will be low-key, they'll be targeted on criminals, for example, not on just everyday people. Will it defuse the situation on the streets in Minneapolis overnight? No, I don't think so. The bad feelings will be there for a while. But will the proximate cause of that anger go away? I think to some extent, yes.
Right. And building on your first answer, I would like to ask how are international students affected by this whole thing unfolding in U.S. and also in Minneapolis, of course, and U.S. economy, is it dependent, or universities, is it dependent on international students as well?
Yes, not only is it good in and of itself, but as part of the business model, international students, part of the revenue stream. Since 2008, Americans have had fewer children, which means that now 18 years later, 19 years later, there are fewer university and college age potential students. And to make up that difference, one of the ways is to bring in more international students. And to the extent that there is a climate of fear, what parent would want their child, legally, by the way, to study abroad? Because the fear is that if you look like you are not quote unquote American, you're subject to this ICE enforcement, this harassment that you don't need. Why would you send one of your offspring into a situation like that? So if this persists over time, it could have a really negative effect on colleges and universities in the United States, quite apart from the terrorizing effect it's having on young people in colleges and universities today.
Right. With that, I would like to thank Mr. Andrew Latham for joining us today from Minneapolis and sharing that insight with us on NewsX World. Now we stay in U.S. Democratic U.S. Senator Elizabeth Warren has criticized President Trump's nomination of Mr. Kevin Warsh as the next Federal Reserve Chair, calling it another move by the president to seize control of the central bank. In a statement, Warren has argued that no Republican should support the nomination until Trump holds his ongoing investigation into the Federal Reserve. Warren's remarks reflect the continued concerns among critics about the administration's influence over the Fed, especially after the public tensions between Trump and current chair Jerome Powell. Now we move the focus on to Bangladesh. Bangladesh will be holding parliamentary elections and a national referendum on February 12th of this year. In the lead up to the polls, political violence and extremist attacks may target rallies, polling stations, and religious sites such as mosques, churches, and temples. The U.S. Embassy in Dhaka has advised U.S. citizens to remain cautious, avoid large gatherings, and be aware of their surroundings. Demonstrations, even those who intended to be peaceful, can escalate into violence. The government has announced transportation restrictions starting February 10th, with a full ban on motorcycles and all transport on February 11th and 12th. As a result, embassy services will be limited on those dates. The country has been gripped by political violence ahead of the elections following the August 2024 toppling of Sheikh Hasina's government. With the ban on Hasina's party, Awami League, authorities are expecting violence to erupt around the poll dates. Now for this discussion, we welcome retired Major General Gigi Dwivedi. He's a veteran and also a professor of international relations and strategic studies. Joins us live from New Delhi.
Thank you, Suma. Thank you.
Thank you for joining. Now looking at this, what are we to make of current situation in Bangladesh? Do you think that Bangladesh is doing enough to carry out peaceful elections on February 12th?
Well, Suma, it's a very crucial time for Bangladesh. The 12th, elections that are taking place, but the environment are very, very delicate. I would say volatile, because with this new administration under Yunus, first and foremost, the law and order is not very effective. There have been series of violent cases against especially minorities, and the radical elements like Islamist element, Jamaatis are calling the shots. So therefore, it's a very, very, I would say, delicate and sensitive period that Bangladesh is going through. The second point is the fairness of elections. That also is a big question mark, because the major party, Awami League, has been banned from the taking part in the elections, and Jamaatis, which is a congregation or the alliance of 10 parties, are actually being supported tacitly by the current administration. So therefore, it's very difficult time for Bangladesh, and especially, I don't think the law and order enforcement agencies are fully in control because of the kind of violence and the instances that have taken place. But nonetheless, some effort has been made, but I don't think it is enough on the ground. And especially, I have a skepticism that the minorities, which traditionally had supported the Awami League, will be very, very cautious or feel intimidated to openly vote. So, on the whole, this is a very, very sensitive situation, very delicate situation, and instances of violence have taken place, and rightly so. Most of the foreign countries, foreign embassies have issued a kind of a warning or a caution that their residents should stay away from the public places or from the places where the gatherings could be attacked, or there can be reasons, or there can be instances of violence. Asuma.
Right. And how do you analyze the current relationship between India and Bangladesh?
Well, first and foremost, the relations between India and Bangladesh have taken a nosedive after Yunus administration has assumed, the power, and there are a couple of reasons for this. First and foremost, Yunus, as a person, is highly indisposed and hostile toward the Indian government. He has a set agenda to bring the radical elements in place. He has cozied up to Pakistan, and today the relation between Bangladesh and Pakistan army actually are growing day by day. More than dozen delegations from each country have visited each other, and some of the very defining developments. Pakistani naval ship Saif, it docked at Chittagong, and the Pakistanis are going to be training the Bangladesh army. There have been joint exercises between Pakistan and the Bangladesh Defense Forces. And along with that is the China. China has a very deep-rooted presence in Bangladesh. They have taken the economic route. About 38 to 40 billion dollars have been committed to the development of Bangladesh. Almost $7 billion have been actually already utilized. And Bangladesh is only yesterday they have signed a agreement to produce drones. Also, there's a very sensitive airport very close to the Indian border. That is Lalmorni Hat, and that is being developed as a base. So all this goes on to show that as far as India is concerned, the security is become a paramount issue, and it is directly, affecting the India's sovereignty and integrity, because a statement have been made by the official in the higher echelons and also by the people that India's seven states, which are very geographically vulnerable, because there's a very narrow corridor, Siliguri corridor, of just about 22-23 kilometers, which connects the North Indian states, that they are vulnerable, and they will make effort to even break their contact with India. So all that which is going on, I think, is of high concerns to India, and India will have to take action both politically and otherwise, because if Bangladesh continues its anti-India approach, is some kind of hostility or belligerency, then I think the action will have to be would be rather hard, and that will have impact on the relationship between the two countries. And my last point is also demographics. The kind of demographic changes that have taken place along the India-Bangladesh border, the kind of inundation, also the illegal immigration that are taking place, all these are highly concerning, and I think India will have to take some very stern steps to ensure that our sovereignty and our integrity is not compromised. Asuma.
Right. And you briefly touched upon this, but how could closer defense engagement between Bangladesh and Pakistan influence the regional security here?
Yes, because the point is that after 71 war, the war which I fought. Bangladesh and Pakistan had no relations as such, and their relations were also almost, you can say, in a very cold freeze state. But the point is, after Union's government has come to power, the whole situation has changed. Now, what is the impact it will have? Because we need to see this whole situation from three dimensions: Bangladesh, then Pakistan and China, because that's a kind of trilateral that is developing. Now there is a direct contact or the connectivity between Bangladesh and Pakistan. The China is deeply interested because of his own interest in Bay of Bengal, his interest in what they call is the BRI, that is the Belt Road Initiative, and also our border with China, especially in the area of Doklam, that is the Siliguri-Sikkim corridor, is highly contested. So when you put all these things together, the kind of cooperation that is developing between the Bangladesh army, the Pakistan army, the kind of, in fact, the Bangladesh army is mostly equipped by the Chinese equipment and also the Pakistan army. So this also ensures interoperability between the defense forces of Pakistan and China and Bangladesh. And lately, Bangladesh has taken some very concrete steps to step up its defense capability. They are raising a commando brigade or special forces brigade. They are also, buying major equipment. Now, JF-17 is one of the major equipment that is going to be bought from Pakistan, which is a joint venture between Pakistan and Bangladesh. And as I already said, the drone manufacturing facility, the agreement has been signed only yesterday. So all I can say is that this trilateral, the kind of bonhomie, kind of coziness that is going on between the Bangladesh, Pakistan army, overseen by China, is very, very sensitive as far as India is concerned.
Thank you very much. With that, I would like to thank retired Major General Gigi Dwivedi for joining us and sharing that insight. Now we move to focus on to China. China is set to lift travel restrictions on a group of British lawmakers. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer has confirmed the move during his ongoing visit to China, the first by a British leader in 8 years. Prime Minister Starmer said he raised the issue directly with President Xi Jinping, who told him the restrictions no longer apply. All British parliamentarians will now be free to travel to China. The sanctions date back to 2021, when Beijing targeted 9 British figures over criticism of alleged human rights abuses in Xinjiang province of China. On Uyghur people, Prime Minister Starmer has stressed engagement allows difficult issues to be raised, but London says it will not lift its own sanctions on Chinese officials in return. That's all we have time for. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.